what really happened to Kelly LeBrock. In the mid-1980s, Kelly LeBrock was everywhere. She was on movie posters, magazine covers, billboards, and television screens, her image instantly recognizable, almost impossible to escape. And then, just as suddenly, she wasn't. There was no scandal, no public meltdown, no dramatic farewell. One of the most visible faces of the decade simply stepped away, leaving behind a question that still lingers decades later. Fame did not arrive for Kelly LeBrock the way it does for most actresses. Before Hollywood ever called, she had already built a career as a highly successful fashion model, working internationally and becoming known for a look that photographers and designers found unforgettable. When film opportunities came, they were not small auditions or background roles. They were major studio projects built to showcase her presence. Almost immediately, she became part of the cultural vocabulary of the 1980s. But beneath the surface, the version of Kelly LeBrock the public embraced was not necessarily the person Hollywood had hired, and that difference would quietly shape everything that followed. She was born in New York City and raised partly in Europe, entering the modeling world at a young age. Modeling taught her discipline, but it also introduced her early to the idea of being seen as an image first and a person second. By the time she transitioned into film, that distinction was already familiar. Her breakout came in 1984 with The Woman in Red opposite Gene Wilder. The film was a mainstream success, but what truly landed was her visual impact. She was not framed as a developing actress or an emerging talent. She was framed as an ideal. That framing intensified dramatically a year later with Weird Science. The role cemented her as a pop culture icon almost overnight. Posters, VHS covers, and late-night television references all reinforced a single idea. Kelly LeBrock was not being marketed as a performer with range. She was being marketed as a fantasy. And while that kind of attention can open doors, it can also quietly close others before you realize it is happening. Hollywood tends to reward momentum, and on the surface, hers was accelerating perfectly. She was recognizable, profitable, and in demand, but the industry's interest came with expectations that were rigid and narrow. Roles offered to her increasingly mirrored the same image, the same tone, the same function. The space for evolution was small, and the pressure to remain frozen in time was immense. For many performers, that trade-off feels worth it. For Kelly LeBrock, it didn't. In 1987, she married Steven Seagal, a rising action star whose career was just beginning to crest. Around the same time, she made a decision that surprised Hollywood far more than any headline ever could. She stepped back, not temporarily, not quietly waiting for the right script. She stepped away almost entirely. What followed was not a fall from grace, it was absence. She moved out of the Hollywood system and eventually settled into a far more private, rural life. She focused on raising her children and distancing herself from the machinery that had defined her public identity. For an industry built on visibility and continuity, this was the one thing it couldn't easily accommodate. Studios do not penalize failure as harshly as they penalize unpredictability, and choosing not to participate is the most unpredictable move of all. Years passed, the industry moved on, new faces replaced old ones, and the image of Kelly LeBrock became frozen in time, replayed through reruns, posters, and nostalgia rather than new work. When she did return occasionally to acting, it was on her own terms in smaller projects without the expectation of reclaiming her former status. The culture had changed, but the memory of her had not evolved with it. What is often misunderstood is that her disappearance was not the result of rejection. It was the result of refusal. Refusal to remain a static symbol. Refusal to negotiate constantly with an industry that demanded total availability in exchange for conditional acceptance. In an era when stepping away was interpreted as failure, she chose something else entirely. Looking back now, the question is not why Kelly LeBrock disappeared. It is whether disappearance was the point. In a system that thrives on exposure, choosing privacy can be the most radical decision a public figure can make. Her story is not a cautionary tale about fame fading. It is a reminder that sometimes the most defining choice in a career is not the role you accept, but the life you decide to protect. If you found this story worth your time, consider subscribing for more quiet, untold chapters from Hollywood history. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.